KP, it's such a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you as
What
well.
is so strange a way to meet. Fancy
Yeah.
meeting fancy meeting you in this strange box.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about the place where you're sitting, what your day has been like? Basically set our a picture of where you are right now.
Sure. I'm in my bedroom. It's the most quiet spot in my house right now. And I am in my homeland. So I recently moved back home to Swinomish. And so I'm coming to you from my indigenous lands. And I have a day job right now, so I'm taking a break from my day job to talk to you for a little bit. And so, yeah, I've been working this morning and I also have a family, so it's school has started, so I was trying to get the kids to like be on their Zoom classes and all set up. So it's been a day so far.
You are completely multitasking.
Yeah.
What a showbiz trooper. So you're based in Washington now, and you were working for many years in Portland. And
Yeah.
that whole Pacific Northwest region seems to be an epicenter of a lot of things going on right now.
Yeah.
There's fire, there is uprising, political uprising, unrest, there's sickness. Everything seems to be really coming to a head in that space. What is that like for you to be located there right now? Right now, it seems very peaceful. There you are in your home, and everything seems clear, and you're gorgeous, and everything seems serene. But then, on the outside of our bubbles, this world is raging.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot going on right now in the world. There seems to be continuously things just adding on and happening. And it's smoky where I am right now, but it's definitely not as smoky as other places south of me, especially where I used to live in Portland. Um, and, there's a lot of strong people out there, I think. I think there's a lot of people who want to just sort of have justice and have a good life for the environment as well. So I'm rooting for them, but also, I think one of the things that I've been thinking about lately, that I think is a privilege too, is to try and do some self-care, and to try and get a space for yourself to just, I don't know. There's a lot going on, like, definitely. And I'm this is definitely coming from a place of privilege because not everyone is able to have self-care. But if it's a possibility, I think like self-care is really important right now.
Did did you those reasons, was that why you returned to Swinomish?
Yes. That is definitely one of the big reasons. The other reason is that there once the pandemic hit, a lot of musicians just could not tour and could not be out on the road, especially if touring is a big part of their lives. And so that was one of the things that happened for me, is that I couldn't tour. And so I was just trying to think like, well, what do I want in life? What's important to me? And one of the big things was family and being close to my parents, and being in my homelands, like being close to water, being near the islands. And so I made the decision with my family to move back home to where I grew up. And it's a really healing place in this area. And like being with the water, being with the land, having all the like nutrients of this area, it's really healing. And so, yeah, that was definitely something that I think also for my mental health to try and like take ownership of like, let's try let's try and be proactive here. I think that was something that I felt like I needed to do with moving back home.
Why do you think this is all happening? All of this tumult in the world. Do you have
I
any?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't know. I look at memes a lot, and there was one meme that was saying like all of this was predicted and it could have not have happened, but the current leadership is letting it happen, and so I think it just I think that sometimes does take into consideration like what are these decisions that we're trying to make for the environment and for people in the world, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I wish that I knew. Do you know?
I don't know. I feel kind of like just cascaded into this chaotic space and just trying to similarly as yourself find a space where it's not overwhelming. I
Hmm.
think judging by the frazzledness of my hair, you're doing a better job. Yeah, I mean, you seem really rock steady and very grounded. And what do you think is it? How do you retain that
I
within the
definitely,
face of this?
yeah, I definitely have a hard time retaining it. I think people can also seem very rock steady, and deep down they're not. I think that's something that is common with mental health, and like right now I am struggling with mental health, and so
You
I'm
are.
trying to do these things
Me
by
too.
by being in nature and by being
Does that
in
help?
it definitely does. I think like connection to like where you are is really helpful for your mental health, and grounding, like being able to like even if you think about like grounding exercises, like trying to ground yourself like physically too, like I think that's really helpful. So, yeah.
Is there any particular grounding exercise you'd be able to share that helps you?
I really like breathing exercises. I'll like go and I'll just like breathe in like for like 5 seconds and be like and hold it and breathe out. And then I just try and like figure, like go through all of the portions of my body just to sort of get my nervous system to be in line, and then also sort of like think about, where you are, the fact that you're like I'm sitting on my bed. I can feel I'm sitting on my bed, and those sorts of things are very helpful. These are definitely things that like I've had to learn for a while, especially from like therapists, to be like, how do I get rid of my anxiety?
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah.
That scanning of the body. I can work at my computer for 18 hours straight, and then I'm just like, and I'm literally sitting there like in the worst body posture. People are like, what
Yeah, yeah,
are you
it's
doing? I
yeah,
don't even notice anything around me. So just taking that moment to clock your surroundings and
yeah,
how you feel. Really
yeah.
important. What was outstanding in your latest album at a party with my brown friends is it really feels like a healing balm. Your voice is powerful. The songs are tender, and there's a real celebration of your community, your indigenous and queer community. I'm wondering, how do you extend that sense of gratitude and care in this moment that is so full of upheaval?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think like I've been trying to support my friends as much as I can. And I have a lot of activist friends. I have a lot of friends who are activists within like the Black and Indigenous and people of color communities. And like they're doing a lot of work right now, and
A lot of work.
a lot of work. And, I feel like, I mean, some of the times where I felt like I can like easily help is just to give money to like
Yeah.
things that people need. Like if someone's trying to have like mutual aid for their communities, like, even if it's like $5, like, or if like you get your paycheck and you can give a little bit more if you're able to, like, because people need a lot of support right now. And so, the album, I guess, like, it's a lot about friendship. And I feel like I think about friends and I think about like how I can support community, because community is really important to me. So, Yeah, I'm trying as much as I can to support, if if I can't, physically be somewhere, support in ways that has an action behind it. If it's like, even if it's like giving money, or you know I think a lot of people share things on social media, but I feel like I've seen people be like, you need to do more than just share on social media.
It's really so true. It's very easy to get, you know, confused and upset by so much of what we see through our screens. And then the other day I walked out into the world and it was like, wow, this is really different from the world inside the screen. That in some ways people were walking about and doing their day without that
Hmm.
sort of high ramped sense. So when you're talking about self-care and the amount of work so many people are doing right now on the front lines, it's just exhausting. And to remember to extend that self-care towards self, to rejuvenate, to be able to tackle all of these difficulties, I think is so important.
Yeah.
The idea of inclusion is a focus of this festival. And what is your idea of inclusion? What is how are you in the world, and how do you include people?
Mm-hmm. Um, well, I think before I think about inclusion, I think about representation, and I think about communities that aren't necessarily represented within a wider sphere. And along with that, I also think about the representation of Indigenous people within popular culture, because obviously I'm a musician and I'm in popular culture. I'm Indigenous as well. And I look around myself and I don't see a lot of people who are necessarily uh, have like who have a platform like me. But there are definitely people out there who do the same thing as me, and so I think about wanting peers in this, like, I guess maybe indie rock scene, or any sort of like kind of like maybe pop culture, pop scene. I think about like there is a lack of representation and there needs to be more representation. So if we're talking about inclusion, I think we definitely, oh, sorry, we definitely need
Did you
to.
just spit on your screen?
No, somebody texted me and I was trying to swipe it away. I was trying to be nonchalant, but it just didn't happen. Anyway, but yeah, so inclusion, I think before we think about inclusion, we have to think about, representation, and I think it goes alongside of that. And so for inclusion, I the way that I work is I try to include voices who are most commonly thought of as marginalized, and try and get them into a sphere that isn't necessarily um, marginalized anymore, or that is maybe even like celebratory of identity. And so, you know, those are some thoughts that I think of. So like, for instance, I think about my voice as an Indigenous person and how that's represented. I feel like I've done interviews where uh, it hasn't necessarily been represented in the way that I want to, and that's like comparative to how Indigenous culture is represented in textbooks, like written mostly by white men, and through that lens, not through a lens of indigeneity, and through a lens that where it's like first person, this is what I'm trying to talk about, trying to share my story.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my music videos, or pretty much all of my music videos, I've worked with indigenous artists to film how I want this particular image to come across to people who listen to my music, to people who want to hear more about me. And so small things like that, I think, that's how I like to work with inclusion. And I feel
Hmm.
like I'm constantly, trying to think of other ways too to have more inclusion, and trying to also be more inclusive of our Black community, of relatives, and in the Black community, of relatives who are Afro Indigenous and who are Black Indigenous too. Like, that's something that like I'm thinking about as well, and will be thinking about for like other projects that I'm doing in the future.
Great. Yeah, so it's
So
really, really much, very much not granting your being over to someone else to define, but defining yourself through yourself
right.
on your own platform, and
Yeah.
inviting your friends to be part of that because they get you and you get them. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And going forward with your music, you're back home, your kids are at school, everything's cool, pretty much, kind of, as cool
Kind
as
of.
can be, as cool as can be. And so, how are you going to proceed forward with your music, with your creativity?
um I'm working on some new songs right now, and I'm going to record this weekend. I think I so one of my friends who I recorded my first album with lives nearby because I recorded it at the studio called the Anacortes Unknown. And I feel like I sort of just have now like a home studio where I can just go and record at that studio. So that's my plan is over the next few to several months, I'm just going to go and record songs. I don't really know what it's going to turn out to be. I've never done it this way. The only way that I've like been in recording process is having a goal of like recording an album. But right now, because I'm not entirely sure when we will be able to tour again, and what that will look like for the band. I'm just sort of gonna record as it goes. So that's what
Great.
I'm doing right now.
Well, best of luck, KP, and so
Thank
nice to
you.
meet you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.